Sup dudes, Joyboy here. Got another theory for you today. This one is going to be a bit shorter than some of my other theories, so if you enjoy shorter theories, this theory might be for you. I want to talk about Pedro and whether or not he will be a good guy or a bad guy and the likelihood of that occurring, and potentially what his motivation for going to Whole Cake Island might be if he is indeed a bad guy. Alright, so first things first is that a lot of people know by now, but if you don't, Kaido and his crew have a card game theme, which is to say that the people working under Kaido currently are Joker, also known as Doflamingo, a guy named Jack, which could be symbolizing the Jack card in playing card games, and then he has some other subordinates named Jin Rummy and Sheep's Head, which are card games. And so using this, it's kind of interesting that there is another character in the One Piece verse that follows this theme that might be interesting, which is that Pedro is also a card game that is quite popular around the world. So many people speculate because of this that Pedro might actually be secretly working under Kaido. While this isn't 100% conclusive, I do think it's really interesting that if Pedro is not an undercover agent for Kaido, Oda really overlooked Pedro the card game when he named Pedro the character. Especially since the Kaido arc is happening right now, for him to name Pedro after a popular card game is just a huge oversight, and one that I don't think Oda tends to make. Definitely, I can't think of any other example of him doing something like this, which really suggests to me that there might be some credence to this idea that Pedro is actually named after a card game intentionally because he is working under Kaido in some facet. And I'm going to stray away from analytical analysis here and just focus on sort of the emotional analysis, but just the impression that I get from Pedro the character is very unclear. Whereas a lot of the other minks are very jovial, very happy characters that you can tell, you can feel are lighthearted. Pedro has a certain complexity about him, a deepness, a sort of darkness that I can't necessarily, validate with words, but I just feel it. And I don't know if y'all feel the same, but definitely I think Pedro is a much more complex character than a lot of the other minks. And this also might help explain why he's going to Whole Cake Island, because he is a much more fleshed out character, or Oda is intending to flesh him out a lot more. So with this idea in your head, I want to focus on analyzing from this perspective, and I don't think that this is necessarily the most likely situation, but I do think that it's plausible that Pedro is actually working for Kaido. Why would Pedro want to go to Whole Cake Island? I think it's really curious that, if we analyze this from a theory standpoint, what sort of motivation would he have to go to Whole Cake Island? And I think there is a very strong motivation for somebody working for Kaido to want to go to Whole Cake Island, and that is Caesar. We've seen throughout the show that Caesar is of extreme importance to Kaido. Caesar makes smile, or makes sad, and Doflamingo made smile for Kaido's Zone Smile army. And so without Caesar, I think, it's very clear that Kaido is looking for Caesar, and that he would go to pretty much any length to retrieve him back, as well as Doflamingo. We saw that Jack took on a fleet with a previous fleet admiral, an actual admiral, and a couple of vice admirals, which is absolutely crazy. So, given this, Pedro could be looking to go to Whole Cake Island to rescue Caesar for Kaido. I think that would make a lot of sense. And given this speculation, it actually, I think, adds further credence to the idea that it's possible that Pedro is in fact working for Kaido, because I doubt that Kaido has given up trying to retrieve Caesar. And so, it would make sense that he should have somebody still looking for Caesar and trying to retrieve Caesar from Big Mom. And there's one additional point that I think really validates this idea that Pedro is in fact working for Kaido, and that is that somehow Jack has repeatedly found Zoe, the moving island, which is impossible to track. We learned from Law that he needed a Vibra card through Beppo in order to find the island. So, and this is actually brought up in a recent chapter where Nekomushi basically says out loud, how did Jack find this island again? This is a mystery. Given this is stated, Oda is telling us that there is some method that we will find out later that Jack found out how to find Zunisha and Zoe. And given all this speculation about Pedro, I think that it's very likely, or not very likely, but I think it is semi-likely, it is very plausible that Pedro is actually the one who is holding, they have Pedro's Vibra card, and that's how they're finding Zoe repeatedly. I think there is plenty of foreshadowing here from Oda to suggest that, at the very least, something is going on, and the best idea that we have at this moment is that it is Pedro. So in conclusion, here's what I've speculated. Pedro is actually working under Kaido because Pedro's name follows the card theme that all of Kaido's crew names also follow. We also know that Jack is finding Zoe, and Pedro is a likely suspect given what we know so far. And I think that if Pedro is working under Caesar, the reason why he wanted to travel with these Straw Hats so badly is because he wants to rescue Caesar the Clown for Kaido, because Caesar helps make Smile for Kaido's crew. And that's all I got for this theory. Hope you enjoyed.